Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar. We'll give everyone just a minute or two to join before we get started. In the meantime, if you want to let me know where you're joining us from today, I'm here in the Poplar Cork office in Ireland. The numbers are flying in here. It's fantastic. We might actually get started. Okay, so my name is Ashley Tobin, and I'm the Director of Customer Success for the MIA team here at Populo. I'd like to welcome you to our panel discussion today on employee communication trends for 2024. The last several years have put employee communicators in the limelight, from communicating throughout uncertain times to reimagining the employee experience during a time when the workplace is more loosely defined than ever before. New AI technology is introduced quickly, noteworthy trends in IC crop up frequently, and they must be addressed, which begs the question, what trends should IC keep an eye out for in 2024? Our panel today is going to dive into the key challenges, the trends and opportunities for employee communicators in 2024, as well as some best practices, strategies to help move comms forward. But first, we do have a few housekeeping notes. We are using the Zoom platform. Please feel free to use the chat function to enter any comments or thoughts you have, and the Q&A box to enter questions throughout the conversation. We will save time at the end to get through as many questions as possible, and after the webinar, we will be sharing a recording of this webinar. So now, a little bit about your host today, Populo. Populo is a leading communication software company. With the Populo platform, communicators can publish and measure targeted, personalized content across email, digital signage, mobile, Microsoft Teams, SharePoint, and more, all from a single platform. We currently work with thousands of companies in over 80 countries, as well as nearly half of the Fortune 100 companies, supplying enterprise-grade solutions to build more meaningful connections with the people who matter most. Now, on to the panelists for today's discussion. As I mentioned at the start, my name is Ashley Tobin, and I'll be moderating today's discussion. Now, I'd like to introduce you to the panelists, Sharon McIntosh, President and Founder of And Then Communications, and Mark Dollins, President of North Star Communications Consulting. Welcome, Sharon and Mark.
Hey, Ashley, it's great to be here.
That's great. And Mark?
Hi there.
I might, do you want to give an introduction there, Sharon?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much, Ashley, and welcome everyone. I loved seeing all the international folks come in. That's fantastic. So I'm Sharon McIntosh. I am President and Founder of And Then Communications, as Ashley mentioned, which is really focused on employee and change communications consulting, as well as a couple of years ago, I became a certified coach. So I coach internal communicators like yourselves. And then in addition to that, in the past several years, I've been an advisor to the Executive Communication Council, which is a group of executive communication pros who support their leaders and CEOs at companies like Target, Delta Airlines, and Verizon. And before that, before starting my own business, I served as Vice President of Global Internal Communications. And the best part about that job was that I got to meet Mark Dollins and work with Mark Dollins while I was at PepsiCo. So I'm really looking forward to analyzing some of these 2024 trends and with Mark and everyone on this webinar. So Mark, over to you.
Thanks, Sharon, and hi, everybody. Thanks for the introduction, Ashley. Like Sharon, I come from a corporate communications background over 35 years. Boy, does that make me sound old, but I did run global employee communications for the Quaker Oats company before becoming part of PepsiCo and running global internal comms there, as well as the DuPont company. But beyond the employee communications, I also had some experience doing general corporate communications and PR, and served as the Chief Communication Officer for Quaker Oats, as well as PepsiCo America Foods and Beverages. I serve currently as an adjunct professor at the University of Missouri School of Journalism, where I teach on employee communications and engagement. I wrote a book on employee communications with my partner, John Stemmel, called Engaging Employees Through Strategic Communication. So been spending a lot of time in the recent 12 to 18 months, doing research on artificial intelligence and how it applies to the world of communications, and we've got a lot more coming very soon. North Star, the company that I currently run, focuses also on employee communications, engagement, in change management, as well as talent development for corporate communications. And we work with regional, national, and global companies and have done so for about 13 years. I have to say that partnering with Sharon at PepsiCo, it was one of the highlights of my career as a communicator in the corporate world. And she has been an amazing colleague ever since, and truly one of the most brilliant minds in employee communications. So that's the story for Sharon and for me. And Ashley, I'll turn that back over to you.
That's fantastic, Mark. A wealth of knowledge between you both. It's so great to have you here today. Thank you. So we're going to just maybe pull up a poll to start off with. I think it'd be very interesting to get the audience's opinion on this. We'll just pull it up there now. There we go. So which of the following employee communication trends do you believe will be the most prominent in 2024? Artificial intelligence, employee well-being, leadership communications, hyper-personalization, crisis communications, or hybrid work return to office or culture? So maybe if you could just rank the top three there, that would be great. Thank you.
I just learned I can't vote.
I was trying to as well, Mark. And then I was like, okay.
Oh, man. All right.
Okay, well, that's going to skew the results.
Yeah. So maybe we'll see there what's after coming in. Oh, it's saying nobody's able to submit their answers. Apologies.
Oh, okay.
And we're just getting the back end team to look into that, guys. I can't control it either. Apologies. Oh, somebody's saying here you have to submit an answer for every item. So maybe it's the configuration of it. Thank you. We'll just give it another few seconds, maybe, because people were trying to figure that out, and apologies. Okay, maybe now if we could pull the results, that would be great. Now, what's this saying?
Yep. Artificial intelligence, 97%. Wow. Leadership comms, employee well-being. Well, looks like we picked the right topics to talk about today.
I was going to say we're actually touching on a lot of that, so it's great. So we'll just get stuck in. So looking at the marketplace in 2024, what are some of the external factors that are driving trends for internal communicators? Mark, we might get you to get your advice on that.
Sure. You know what? Sharon and I are going to talk about a number of trends, but when you think about them collectively, they're all threaded together around a couple of key themes. One is trust, which is built through transparency, innovation and agility, which are very much tied to responding to the needs of the market and the marketplace. Well-being was another one, and then a massive global technology that you guys are already tuning into, and that is artificial intelligence. So we're going to tie these themes specifically to what we as internal communicators can do. Let me start very quickly with trust and transparencies. You know, this is all about not just what our companies are doing, but how we're doing it and why. So that really ties to the sense of purpose. And we need to ask ourselves how we can help. How do we help build trust from the inside out? And I would say a great source of data to help prove this out is the Edelman 2024 Trust Barometer. It's a wonderful report, as many of you know, but this year's report really focuses on the fact that there are trust issues with global power, and it's in decline. Yeah, innovation, not surprisingly, is under a very intense regulatory microscope with the expertise, right, that really is needed to govern that, not trusted by the population with governments to handle. So what that means is that we have to help enable and equip our leaders with the right kinds of communication to help build that trust in whatever innovation that our companies are creating. Science basically needs help from communication for stakeholders across the gamut to start and to continue trusting us. And we really do need to start from the inside out. If it leads to a better world, stakeholders, what we're seeing in the research and what Edelman discovered, if it leads to a better world, our stakeholders are more inclined to support that science and that innovation that's taking place. So that's sort of the backdrop around all this. But at the same time, if we think about what's happening in the economic world, after a couple of years of increased investment in employee communications, we're starting to see some contraction as the market is dealing with kind of tightening some belts here. So with that current financial background, we have slower economic growth, and we can expect, as a result, like everybody else, slower investment in employee communications, as of course the demands increase. And so one of the driving forces, and another key thing I'm going to talk about, is hyper-personalization, right? So we see it in the external media, and we are increasingly going to be expected to deliver that kind of communication to employees internally. We have to get smarter with data. We have to find technologies that help us reach our internal cohorts in more personalized ways and more relevant ways. That means we got to package our content differently across the channels and customize messaging. So example, if you've got earnings or sales news, we have to leverage AI, and we're going to talk a lot about artificial intelligence later on in the conversation, but you can see even in my opening remarks here, how it's tied in as a thematic element of a driver of a trend, of a number of trends that we're seeing in internal communications. So leveraging AI technologies to work across multimodal capabilities, so across different types of media, different types of channel. And at the same time, I'll close with this and turn it over to Sharon. We have increasing demand for relevant content creation, right? It's outpacing what we can do internally based off of our bandwidth, and in some cases, the skill sets that we have. So we have this less being invested, more demand for hyper personalization, and kind of capacity of bandwidth. How do we address this? Well, artificial intelligence, again, one of those key themes, is we're going to talk about it later, is one way that we can address it. So Sharon.
Fantastic, Mark. Yeah, one of the things I thought was interesting on the survey was that crisis communications, I think, came out as last. And if you were with me on this trend call last year, I didn't talk about crisis communication, and I'm going to lead with it this year. So in the chat, if you did vote for crisis communication, I'm curious what type of crises you're thinking about. Because I think 2024 is going to feel like we're in this perma-crisis world. And what we mean by that is sort of one crisis after another after another. I think this year is going to feel closer to 2021 than it did last year. Yeah, a lot of people are talking about what are sort of some of the things we're worried about, right? I think we're going to see social crises. I think we're going to see employee activism. The rise of unions, I think, are getting really stronger. If you've seen what Sean Fain has done with the UAW, he's being really strategic about how he's approaching companies and surprising companies in many ways. And sort of underscoring what Mark said about trust, I think we're going to be dealing with the crisis of truth. So this is where these crises start to combine. So let's talk about the elections, for example. We have worldwide 60 elections worldwide happening this year. A lot of people, even worldwide, are going to be focusing on the one here in the US. But then we also have AI and some of the downsides of AI, which is the misinformation, the deep fakes. You might have seen a couple of weeks ago, President Biden was targeted as a deep fake where his voice was used to send out robocalls to the state of New Hampshire. And it sounded pretty close to him, but he was saying, don't vote. It was completely a deep fake. So why is this sort of my focus this year? Because it amplifies uncertainty. And the word I think we're going to start hearing about is that sort of starts to cycle through is when we can't sort of trust what we're seeing, then bad actors can also take advantage of that. So there's a new term called liar's dividend, which is someone who's lying, but there's a true video out there, for example, and that person says, oh, that's just a deep fake. So we're left in the situation of what on earth do we trust? Who do we trust? And to Mark's point, your company sort of continues to sort of raise that up. So you have this really great option to sort of come to the forefront on these crises. So if I was sitting in a company right now, the first thing I would do is audit all my leadership communication. Go back and see what your leader has said about any social crisis, about any political crisis, and get them all right at your fingertips. Because if you're going to be having him or her say something this year, you want to know what they said in the past. There's got to be some sort of level of consistency. And then the second thing, I'm hoping all of you are part of crisis plans and a crisis team, is that to start the scenario planning now. So you mentioned layoffs, you mentioned politics, labor issues. Those are the scenarios you should be planning for now. And then I think getting your leaders focused on trust. I saw a question earlier about like, what do we do practically about trust? Well, we know the leaders increase trust when they're communicating well. But in a crisis, a lot of times, and I'm sure many of you have experienced it, you can kind of go back into your shell. And to increase that trust, you need to do a few things. So it's about keeping employees in the loop through that crisis. It's about looking at your values and really understanding when does the leader say something and when don't they say something. And at the very least, acknowledging, Mark's going to talk a little bit more about kind of where we are mentally these days, but acknowledging that whatever crisis is happening is affecting your employees. So there's got to be a level of care that comes through, and care and empathy that comes through your communication. And then finally, sort of welcoming honest feedback, I think is going to be really critical.
Sharon, are you seeing that also, the issue of trust internally inside organizations, or is this more about how to build that trust and address crises with external stakeholders?
I'm seeing it more. I think if the leader is doing a good job, you've got that trust built. But you know, I'm sure many of you were dealing with the Israel-Hamas conflict and how that, I mean, that was a tough one for leaders to sort of think through. But you know, internally, one of the things we can still acknowledge is like, hey, there's a lot of emotion going on here, and just acknowledging that, I think, goes a long way.
That's really interesting. And if we were to look internally, what are the internal forces within organizations that are driving the needs for internal comms?
So I would say two issues right now. One is employee disengagement, and the other one is diminishing attention spans. And you know, our employees are receiving so much information, it's crazy, and we're trying to sort of break through with those, you know, really important ways to try to get through. So where are we on employee engagement? So we're down. So surprisingly, and yet maybe not surprisingly, the Gallup says the highest number they had was at 40% in 2020. And that's because all of you were doing a crazy amount of communication, if you recall. And the companies were often sort of the go-to in the middle of COVID. Mark didn't sleep, I didn't sleep. You didn't sleep. It was sort of around the clock. But that has dropped from 40% in 2020 to 33% in 2023. And it actually started to drop, right, even more by a point or so at the end of last year. And then we have, I would say, another internal point is the generational changes. I was listening to the WEF president give out this stat, which I thought was fascinating, that the average person in the world is 29 years old. The average decision maker in the world is 55 years old. So we've got these generational gaps that are happening, and Gen Z is coming into the workforce, and their engagement is slightly lower than everyone else, but their social and political engagement is higher.
Hmm.
So they're often your sort of more vocal employees. And then the other thing we're seeing in some of the survey data is that people are getting disconnected from their mission and purpose. And we know as internal communicators, that's so critical to feeling like you a sense of belonging, to sort of have that. And we're also seeing that less people are saying there's somebody at work that cares about me as a person, which is concerning. So how do we respond to all this? Mark also already hit on sort of this hyper focus on segmentation, which I think is so critical. I do think we need to be more creative and not sort of and somewhat unexpected. I also think we need to pay close attention to our managers, and we start with listening. I just did some work for a client last month about doing focus groups and surveys with people managers. And I was so surprised that the main response they had to the focus groups was gratitude. Because I said, we want to talk to you before we actually start rolling out the communications. And they said, this has never been done before. This is fantastic. So really listening to them. The managers, I think, are under particular stress right now. And they're often not getting the attention they need. There's another study that said only 3 in 10 managers strongly agree that their supervisors are sort of telling them what's going on in the organization. Number 2, I think focusing on leadership communications is going to be really critical. 85% of employees report that they are most motivated when the executive management gives them regular updates. I think that's a huge way to sort of close the gap. And one really important role you can play is giving that leader the feedback from employees, all the listening that you've done. And then finally measuring and sharing data. So when you do these surveys, and I'm starting to see this change a little bit, and I hope it continues, do the survey and then tell employees what they said. If you are not going to tell them what they said, it is better for you not to do the survey at all. Because that actually, I think Gallup actually has data out there saying that it sort of decreased.
Yeah, I think that's so true, Sharon. And we actually saw a big spike in the survey functionality in the Popolo tool last year. So communicators are understanding how important it is to be listening to employees and what they're saying and taking action. And I think it's not just getting the message out there, it's actually looking at the analytics, who's engaged, who's not engaged, and tweaking your message, or may that be channel based on what the analytics and the data is saying. So completely agree.
That's excellent.
Hey, Sharon, can I ask a question about with all the information overload, are you seeing that companies are needing to spend a little bit more time on channel management internally, kind of thinking through, taking a fresh look at what's working, and are we over communicating by using too many channels? Maybe not so much the messaging, but in terms of access to
Completely,
the channel.
Mark. It's actually the biggest reason why enterprise customers are turning to Popolo. They want to target the right message to the right person at the right time through the right channel, and they actually have to do it faster and quicker with less people more than ever before. So completely, we're seeing that at Popolo.
I think that's a great point, because I think often we just think there's a new channel that's going to solve the issue, and it doesn't. And again, you start laying on the things like AI. That's going to be really, really tricky.
Yeah.
And a question on leaders. When you talk about leadership communication, are you thinking only executive leadership, or are there other levels of people leaders that we need to be thinking about, and maybe even building dedicated channels for?
Yeah, the one thing I like to do is tell everyone that every single employee is a leader across the board. But I think thinking through those different tiers of leadership, you're right, Mark. There's sort of the manager leadership. There's the CEO and the C-suite leadership, and then there's the middle leadership. And I think thinking through all those different platforms, but you're right, channel's one issue, but obviously that narrative and that consistent narrative across the board is really critical.
Well, I'm going to build on your comments around the anxiety and the feelings that, and this is the softer side, right, that we still have to deal with. And what I'm seeing as a big trend, and I saw it in the survey results here already, is that employee well-being is becoming a really big focus area, not just for communicators, but also for HR. And as I think about this concept of leaders making sure that they have the empathy and they're modeling the right behaviors, and that leaders have the right communication and the right tools to use, right? And so some of these things we do automatically, right? Acknowledge, and to your point, show appreciation for what employees are doing, and organizing team building activities to strengthen the interpersonal relationships, especially as we have this hybrid world that we're a world work that we are living in, and we're bringing on new people who don't have the experience of going into a brick and mortar location every day and hanging by the water cooler or popping in somebody's office. It really creates different team dynamics, and the importance of taking breaks. I mean, these really simple things, right? But what else can we do? What else can managers do? Well, a big area that companies are starting to invest in is, can we give employees new tools to either help them, manage or to help them manage their workload a little bit more effectively? And it might be a project management software, time management training, or assistance with helping them prioritize all the volume of stuff that's coming at them. So these are some specific things that, communicators ought to be reaching out, connecting with their HR partners and leadership to say, how do we help people manage this incredible volume of stuff that we're asking them to do? Obviously, connecting regular feedback sessions and check-ins with them. But the other area that I find interesting is employee well-being. It used to be, oh, let's refer everybody to our EAP, and that still is important, and we need to make sure that those programs are promoted, and we're giving specific sort of examples and hopefully some role modeling of behaviors of people who are using it and are comfortable saying, hey, I needed this kind of help emotionally, and I reached out and used the EAP program. But another component of well-being for employees is about financial wellness, right? Not something that we used to apply to this area, but it's a big piece of what all of us think about, is like how healthy do I feel with my finances and my management of whatever resources that I have. So this is where we're seeing organizations doing best practices of making sure that they're integrating this idea of financial well-being in terms of programming. Maybe they're doing webinars or hosting special sessions to help employees better understand and manage the riches, if you will, that they have. So that's one big area is well-being. Another thing that's happening as a result of COVID that Sharon mentioned was corporate values are starting to evolve, and they're emphasizing greater focus on adaptability, right? And a culture of continuous innovation. Do we think that feeds into the volume of work that needs to be done? Do we think that feeds into the idea of technology and innovation and artificial intelligence? Yeah, it does. Absolutely. So we have to pay attention to what's happening in our cultures as we're putting more focus on areas about being more responsive to change and being more innovative to stay competitive, right? And obviously very dynamic markets. And Sharon mentioned the perma crises, and that's also creating a shift in many organizations' values, and they're focusing more on resilience and crisis preparedness. So they're placing a greater importance on building resilient models for their businesses and adapting swiftly to changes. And then all of this, when you put it together, adds up to a very familiar concept that I know you all heard, and that is change management. And I'm gonna say something today. I've never said it this directly. Employee communicators, if you are not certified in a discipline of change management, you're going to be left behind. I've been talking about this for several years as a nice to do, but change management is no longer a nice to have. It is I got to have this skill. I have to understand the discipline of change management. I need to be able to apply change management communication expertise that I have to the world of change management, because everything that we're talking about here is about driving, implementing change successfully. So with that, I think we actually have, this a poll coming up on artificial intelligence, which, by the way, doubles the need for having change management skills. So we've got a poll, number 2 question, that in the next 12 months, where, if anywhere, do you see artificial intelligence creating a value for your employee communications? And you can click any or all of these that apply. And then we'll be able to take a look at how you're responding today versus we asked this question on a webinar back, I think it was in September, actually, if I'm not mistaken, just to get a sense and a quick read on how we as communicators in the world of HR and corporate communications are looking at artificial intelligence.
And hey, Mark, while they're responding to that poll, Christy posted a comment saying #truth on the change management. But where would you suggest folks go to learn more about change management?
Well, you know what? There are a number of disciplines. Both you and I, Sharon, because we went through the class together several years ago, are certified with ProSci change management. I think it's an excellent discipline. That's PROSCI for those of you who haven't heard of it. But you know what? There are a number of other change models that are out there. Go online and just start checking change management communications and change management. And I really want to make point out the differentiation. Change management communications is a component of change management. Both Sharon and I in our careers have been asked to create a change management communications plan where there was no change management plan. That's kind of hard to do, right? So we went out and we learned how to do change management so that we can say, well, let's talk the talk and let's really figure out what the program is for change, and then make sure that we can create the right strategies and execution for communications to ensure that it is successful. Because without it, most change efforts will not succeed. And I think that's been proven in research all over the place. So,
cool, perfect.
You might get the results up there. So,
all right. So this is interesting.
Yes.
Wow.
Generating
Okay.
content.
Okay. All right. So this is interesting. So since we did this poll, we got 5% saying I don't see it creating value. That's actually up, which is surprising because when we asked this question in September, it was only 2% said I don't see any value in it. Generating content, we've got 82% saying that's down also from 89% in September who thought, oh, this is where I'm going to use AI. And then in terms of guiding when and where and how to deliver communications, it's up. I'm sorry, it's also down. Gosh, this is interesting. So we had 52% back in September and now 43%. Driving brand is also down. So that's 13% today, but it was 20% back in September. Driving employee experience. Okay, there's the first one where it's up. So we've got 34% saying that's a priority for you today or how you see it delivering value. And 38%, actually, that's down. 38% it was in September. Okay. Solving strategic business issues like voluntary attrition at 15% today, and that is up from 13% in September. So this is really interesting to me because we're actually seeing less potential and value today than we saw in September. So that'll be interesting as I kind of walk you through what I'm learning. Maybe we can change some minds about how important this is going to be.
Yeah, definitely. I think we might dive into AI a little bit more now anyway. What role do you internal communicators play in the IC landscape, and how can communicators successfully integrate AI positively within the organization? I might turn to Sharon if you could take that one.
Sure. And Mark's gonna do kind of the blow your mind thing that he always does. But I'm curious, in the chat, AI has been almost become a divisive topic. When you think about your role in AI, like what's one word that you would put into place? What's one word that comes to mind? easy, advocate, generic, automation, efficiency, good, speed, manage, time
Never used
saver.
it. Okay. Yep.
Interesting. So I'm seeing a lot of sort of efficiency, time savings. That's certainly it. Where Mark is challenging you on change management, and I 100% agree with that. I'm going to challenge you on leadership in AI. So if I told you you were leading AI, the internal communications plan to roll out AI in your organization, how would you feel about that? I think you are perfectly positioned to take that leadership role. So let's first start kind of acknowledging where we stand. So we saw a little bit on the stats there. PRSA also did a survey and said like 60% of communicators were sporadically using AI. Another study, about 60% of HR folks are interested in AI. That to me is a problem. So that means 40% of HR and communicators aren't doing anything with it. And this is something that is going to be happening so fast and so quick. You think about those of you who are around when the internet was coming around, companies had about 10 years to get through that. Yes. And it's going to be like super, you're literally got months. So so I just want to sort of acknowledge where that stands, acknowledge some of the concerns that are out there. But this is what we do best. And if you understand, that's one reason you need to understand the change communications piece of it, because that's going to be critical. And it's going to be a whole new, I mean, it's literally going to change the way that we're working. So where do we start? And I'm going to get a little practical here, because I do think most people think of it as content creation. And my guess is probably the first time I used it, I was a little disappointed in the results. I think someone mentioned the term formulaic. So let's suppose you're using an AI tool. Let's say it's ChatGPT, hopefully 4, because it's way better than 3.5, to draft an internet article about a remote work policy. And if you type in, you know, I want, please write a 350-word article about a remote work policy, you will get back something that's okay, but not usable. And what I'm hearing is people saying, okay, well, there's some interesting words there, and I move it over. And what I did, and what maybe some of you have done, is you've been so trained on how to use a Google search, you're using AI like a Google search, and it's completely different. So just to sort of up your game on prompting, which is about, you know, giving AI that directive and then having coming back. The mindset I want you to think of is not Google search, but new employee. So you have a brilliant new employee that just started, and you're going to ask them to write an intranet article. And before you did that, you would be giving the background. You would be talking about the tone of voice. You would be sharing examples. You would be educating them about the tone and the editorial style of your organization. You've got to sort of start thinking of AI kind of in that same context. So 3 things that might help you in this is really be clear and provide specific information and context. So you want to tell AI about your audience, the tone that you want. In this instant, what's the policy going to do? And the more specific you are on that background, before you even ask for what you need it to do, the better your results are going to be. Number 2, this is probably the big one, and that is ask questions. So if you had that new employee and you gave them all that background, what's the first thing you would do after you finish giving all that background? You would say, any questions? What'd I miss? That's what you need to do with AI. And AI will spit back to you, again, before you've even asked them to create the content. Here's 6, 7 things that that is going to help AI provide better results. And then the third part that I think is a little different than a Google search is it's a dialogue. So it's going to sort of give you something, you're going to respond and say, you know what, tone's not quite right, but a conversation back and forth. And the final add I will make is that it's our role as internal communicators are more than just crafting messages. It's really going to be the person who brings together the different departments, IT, risk, HR, much like we do in our crisis communication. And you're the ones that have the ground swell of the employees in your ear. So bringing that forward is going to be really important, is going to cement our place in the AI space. So with that, Mark, I'll send that out.
You saw me hold up my 10 because you got 10 out of 10 on the answer on that one. Honestly, being able to lean into this because it is not going to be an option. I would equate this with, when social media appeared, decades ago now, everybody was so nervous about doing their first post. And you look at now what we're doing with it, we have all the analytics, we know what time of day, we know how to personalize. I mean, this is what's going to be happening now for internal communications with artificial intelligence. And let me just start by saying last year, my firm did a landscape white paper report on artificial intelligence, and the folks at Populo will make that available to you, I think, either in the discussion or the chat or through the technology today. And then we also did an attitude, a survey among about 100 or so employee communicators about artificial intelligence and how they're using it. We're going to do the same thing, and we've got a report underway now that's going to go into some of the stuff I'm going to go through. And I realize I only have a couple of minutes, and we're going to open it up to Q&A. But we're gonna do this the landscape report again. So you're going to get an updated report, and I'm excited to share that we are partnering with Populo to get a much greater sample. So all of you and many of your colleagues across the world will be invited to participate in this year's benchmark survey on artificial intelligence and its role with employee communication. So stay tuned, look for that. We're excited about sharing and getting your perspectives. But let me say,
I'll just add in, Mark, that white paper, every single internal communications person should read this white paper. It's fantastic.
Great, thank you. And so Sharon's been talking about inside the paper, we actually have a number of platforms to get people started on artificial intelligence. So I would encourage you to read it. And Sharon's given you some really great advice on how to get started. I'm going to shift gears a little bit beyond use this to make yourself more productive or more efficient and to create that copy because it will save you time. But I also have to say, and I've seen this in the comments, artificial intelligence should not be trusted, right? We have the responsibility as human beings of ensuring that whatever it comes back with, that we validate it, that it does not include things like bias, which many of these large language models include. And I'm going to talk a little bit about how we have some research underway to actually correct and remove some of the bias that's in these large language systems and some of the ethical concerns. But real quickly, when I talk about the more strategic use of artificial intelligence for employee comms, I'm talking about things like predictive analytics. How do we get data that we're collecting about our town halls and our surveys and our leadership communications and the number of hits that we have on our intranets, et cetera? How do we take that data and actually get something out of it using artificial intelligence? Well, we do that by really looking at things like predictive analytics. I've created a document that I think our partners at Populo will put also in the chat that has a number of these platforms, right? And they're called machine learning models, right? And so I'll mention a couple of them and what they do because they're already out there and you can have direct access to quite a few of them. Pulsar, for example, is a social listening tool that employs artificial intelligence to analyze conversations and trends, right? So you guys who have intranets and you've got discussion threads, this is going to save you a ton of time in really being able to come with statistical analyses and emerging trends that are coming out of those conversations. IBM Watson, many of you have organizations where in your HR organization, you're already probably subscribing to IBM Watson, but it provides advanced analytic capabilities to perform, identify patterns and make data-driven predictions about employee engagement. Anybody working on that these days? I think almost all of us, right? So, and the effectiveness of communication. So find out if you're using IBM Watson, partner with your HR folks, figure out how do I use this machine learning environment to understand more about my targets, my internal targets. SciSense is a business intelligence platform that employs artificial data analytics. Employee communicators can use it to gather insights from lots of different sources, including communication platforms and employee surveys, and to predict the trends and improve communication strategies. I have many more that are on the document that Popula will provide, but just to give you a sense, this is where we're going. And let me just tell you my big aha. The first thing I said was get certified in change management and learn it. The second is make a friend in computer science in your IT group, because this is where you are going to need to go. And you may say, I'm not a computer science, I'm not a geek, I'm not a computer science geek. Make friends with one, because you're going to need it, right? There are tons of other models that are out there. We have to learn how to work with people in computer science to articulate from a communications point of view what we want out of those platforms. Okay, so in the meantime, we're seeing the integration of various generative models that are capable of handling multi-modalities, meaning video and static posts, and can create text and summaries. They can do bullet points out of content. And so this is all starting to happen now behind the scenes. You're not seeing a lot of it right now, but many of those platforms that are out there are learning how to create content for not just one platform at a time, but across various different platforms. There's also an increase on making generative models more explainable and interpretable, right? So understanding what are the decision-making processes that go into these models, because when we know that, right, we can start explaining as communicators and start building what Sharon and I have talked about from the beginning here is trust and ensuring transparency. And then there's also advances in what's called zero-shot and few-shot learning. Right. So basically what this is, I found this fascinating, is that these language models can take, learning models can take minimal examples or even no examples and create scenarios or potential solution. So think about, hey, we've never actually colonized anybody on Mars, but we could use a zero-shot and few-shot learning module to basically say, well, how could we colonize on Mars? All right, so that's kind of far-fetched, but we can also use that now to say, well, how could I create greater engagement in this location with these data sets, and employees are dealing with these kinds of issues? And this will be helpful to us in terms of offering potential strategies and potential solutions. So I also have a list in the same document I referenced a moment ago of these zero-shot and few-shot learning apps. So I'm going to stop because I know we're already about out of time before we get to Q&As. But listen, what I really want you to take away from this is not going to go away. We cannot bury our heads. This is an opportunity to learn and lead, right? That's what we want. If we don't, we're going to lag and we are going to lose. Learn and lead, or lag and lose. This means we lean in to understanding the technologies more. We find partners in our organizations, or maybe we have to hire from the outside to learn more about computer science and how that's working into the area of AI. But what we own is the communication expertise. Let's partner, right, with the people who know more about this and come to the right solution that brings us the right data and the strategic insights to create solutions that solve our business's biggest problems. So I'll stop there, and hopefully you guys have a couple of questions we might be able to answer.
Thank you so much, Mark. Yes, the questions are coming in here. Shona, I work for a financial company and we're not allowed to use most AI due to security concerns. Are there any tools others have used we could explore?
Well, there are, I mean, yeah, I think there are a number of organizations that can take a couple of different paths. Most of them are either creating their own generative AI systems inside, right? Or taking one from IBM or excuse me, from
Microsoft.
Yeah, right, from Microsoft or from Google, and they're adapting that for internal use. So I think companies that say we're simply not going to use AI will find very quickly that they're going to start losing in the marketplace because they won't have the speed, they won't have the agility, they won't have the ability to address these things that all their competitors are starting to use. So I think if it's the policy today, we don't use AI, just like all the organizations who said we don't want social media, we don't want intranets, it'll change.
Yeah,
So hang
of course.
tough. But in the meantime, educate yourself, right?
Every employee has one of these, a version of one of these that they can get
exactly.
ChatGPT on their phone.
Right.
Yeah.
And you can't put, I mean, in organizations, you really shouldn't put data onto any into those generative AI, right? You don't put company names, you certainly don't put numbers and statistics. You have to protect privacy, but you can certainly start asking questions just on your own. Hey, if they're more generic in nature and don't get into your company's specific data, you should be fine. So don't take that as a sign that I shouldn't know, I shouldn't learn about generative AI and how it can support employee communications. Just take it as I may have to take a different route, and I'll have to wait for the company to catch up with me or go someplace else where it's being embraced.
Great, thanks, Mark. Does Poplo have an AI tool? Yes, we do. So Shauna, please contact your customer success manager and they will tell you more about that. But we have, it's Poplo AI Assist, so it'll help you reduce down with content creation, the tone, the length of it. It's fantastic. So please do reach out to your CSM and we'll tell you more about that. Linda, would you provide some examples of how to hyper-personalize messages? I understand sending messages on the channels that people use, timing of messages. What else can be done?
One thing that I think is, and I'll start, Mark, but feel free to weigh in, is personas, and really thinking through the different personas in your organization. So we were talking about those 3 levels of leadership, but you have, folks who work in plants who have a different persona than a people manager. So starting to think through and actually, and keep on sort of the marketing hat, if you will, and think through what does that person need, what's sort of stressing them out, and then you start kind of customizing from that perspective.
Yeah, and
Mark,
and to your point, generative AI can already address a number of cohorts that are out there. If you want to address hourly employees versus management or supervisory, if you want to address women versus men, if you want to address employees in Brazil or Italy or China versus employees in the United States, to look at those cultural differences. These language models are learning, right? And you, by the way, when I get back to my closing comments about training these machines, you have the ability to also train these machines in specifics of tone, right? I want something a little softer. I want something harder. I need a harder edge. Here's an example of an executive's communication that has the right tone. Use this tone to deliver a new message to frontline employees. It can deliver on that. And it's only going to get better and smarter, right? But you got to get in there and you got to practice. You just got to experiment with it to find out what really works. Because you'll see, to Sharon's point, at first, it wasn't so great. It's getting much, much better very quickly, right? Machines learn, I think, a lot faster than us humans. And so that's why I think you're going to have more success getting in there and just experimenting with it. But it can do that kind of customization of messaging, hyper-personalization.
Yeah, and I like, for those of you who know Shaw Holtz, I was watching some of the comments in the chat. His quote was a few weeks ago when I was on the phone with him. He said, "I think content creation is the least interesting thing that AI does." So for communicators,
and by the way, those
getting all the attention.
Yeah. And those of you who have things like Active Directory that you can actually start to pull employee data and say, I want these kinds of people, and then you can articulate that in using your generative AI. That's what we're talking about in terms of hyper-personalization. And you might be in the process of developing different kinds of distribution lists than you've ever had before. And that's okay. That's what that's what's going to help you connect and resonate and engage your employees with content and communication.
Great. And Izzy, what are the latest IC trends in operational comms?
IC trends in...
I think it's in frontline.
Oh, okay. So go ahead, Sarah.
I was going to say, which I'm delighted with. I'm starting to see way more focus on these folks who are in operations, really looking at the communication. I think they've been sort of our forgotten folks right from the start. And a huge focus, often it's, at PepsiCo, it was like 3/4 of our organization was in the plants. So finding ways to engage them. The channel I'm seeing moving into that is a text messaging kind of format, or something that comes on the phones. But again, not everyone in operations is able to use phones. So I'm happy to see a renewed focus on that. Almost all my clients are looking at ops.
Yeah, I'll definitely second that. I have several projects right now looking at operations communications and how we can, the whole idea of channel optimization, as I mentioned before with Sharon, because that's a big piece of this. And frontline employees either don't have access or they have too much access to too many different points of communication, right? In some cases, we have too many. I have a laptop, I have an iPad, I have the screen when I walk in. And as a result, there really isn't any kind of coordination, or I call it air traffic control, on how content gets selected, and I should say how it gets prioritized, and specifically how are we connecting with that frontline management. So the other question I was asking Sharon about leadership communications, that's a key area now that we're really starting to see a greater focus on, is how do we equip our frontline people leaders with the right tools so that they're empowered to deliver and support the company mission and or strategies.
Great, thanks, Mark. Sorry, there's another poll after coming up here. If you're interested in talking to a Poplar rep, if you could just answer that, that would be great, and somebody will be in touch with you. Back to the questions. So, Hannah, you've inspired me to learn more about Gen AI, as it's a key focus for the firm I work for. I've been challenged with building a world-class global comms function. What are the 3 things you focus on when faced with this big ambition? Good question, Hannah.
That's fantastic, Hannah. I'll give one. I'll let Mark weigh in. I would say if I was building the world-class global communication function, the first thing I would do is audit. So I would get out there and listen. I would be doing focus groups. I would be looking across everything there is today and just taking probably a few months, if you can, to get an understanding of what exists today and what are the outages. I also would be talking to leadership as part of that audit, but really getting out there and listening, and it is just going to do a world of good.
I absolutely agreed. And I would just add, the other thing that I'd be looking at is, what's your story? What is your narrative? And I'm finding that more organizations are getting lost because they don't have clarity about why they exist, and they don't connect day-to-day communications to their purpose. It's a big outage. It's a big missed opportunity. And 9 out of 10 times it's because the story itself either hasn't been refreshed or hasn't been addressed in quite some time, or they never really went to the trouble of articulating it and get the buy-in from leadership. And they don't train communicators and train leaders about how to use that narrative to help drive either change or just organizational performance. So I think in addition to looking at the channels, talking with leaders, you got to have real clarity and commitment to delivering whatever narrative that you have, which of course is going to include that sense of purpose that we talked about, right? So that's about the building of trust. And then of course I would say lean into AI.
And lean into AI.
And change management. Those are the 2 things.
Lean into the skills that AI can't do. And that is your storytelling. Right. That is your empathy.
Yes,
that's your
exactly.
EQ. So
that's the head, hands, and heart, right? That's what we're good at. We're right at addressing and connecting to the heart. And no machine's ever going to beat us at that.
Great stuff. We're actually at time now, guys. So there's only a handful more questions which we'll follow up offline. I just want to thank Sharon and Mark. Thank you so much. I hope everyone found it very useful today. I think I've learned loads myself. There will be a recording sent after this session. And thanks again, everyone, for dialing in today.
Thanks, everyone. Feel free to reach out.
Thanks so much. All right.